Hello and welcome to the Japan Foundation Asia Center online seminar series, Asia Center TERAKOYA. This is the second online seminar we are doing for this series in 2021. The theme of today's seminar is Magical Islamism. Feby Indirani talks about Islam and society in contemporary Indonesia. We have invited Indonesian author Ms. Feby Indirani to join us and talk about her works as well as other topics. I am Takeda Yasutaka from the Japan Foundation Asia Center, and I will serve as MC for the overall session. I'd like to briefly talk about how we came to select the theme for today's TERAKOYA seminar. The Japan Foundation Asia Center has been conducting a program that facilitates exchange between people in Japan and Muslims in Southeast Asia in order to foster a better understanding of the Muslim society and culture in Southeast Asia and a better understanding of Islam in Japan. The program is named Talk with Muslims, which we call TAMU for short. Today's TERAKOYA seminar is positioned as one part of the TAMU program. The TAMU program has been running for the past 4 years, starting in 2016. This annual program has been inviting young Muslims from Southeast Asian countries to come to Japan to interact and have dialogues with people from different backgrounds in Japan. For 2020, we had planned to hold seminars in Tokyo in February and March. But due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we unfortunately had to cancel our plans. After 1 year, we resumed TAMU in this new online format with a little bit of a different content. And now I would like to introduce the speakers for today. First, joining us from Jakarta, Indonesia, is the author Ms. Feby Indirani. Feby-san, as I would like to call you, san, is a Japanese honorific that is gender neutral. Thank you very much for joining us today from Indonesia. Feby-san has written about how in Indonesian society, religious intolerance is bringing about a social divide, presenting the issues through the creative medium of fiction. We really look forward to your talk today, Feby-san. And here in the venue on the first floor of the Japan Foundation headquarters, we are joined by Professor Nonaka, who is an associate professor at Keio University. Nonaka-san has been researching acceptance and changes in the influence of Islam in Indonesia and other Southeast Asian countries from a social and cultural perspective. I believe we will get to hear more about this later, but she has translated 2 short stories by Feby-san from the original Indonesian language into Japanese. Nonaka-san will also be the moderator for today's session. Next, I'd like to introduce the other speakers who are joining us online. In the screen below Feby-san, we are joined by Professor OKA Mari from the Graduate School of Human and Environmental Studies at Kyoto University. Her area of research is modern Arabic literature, and Feby-san's 2 short stories translated by Nonaka-san will be included in the collection of contemporary Middle Eastern literature 2020, which is scheduled for publication this year. Oka-san is the editor of this collection and has done us a special favor in providing us with the manuscripts before publication. Thank you very much. And next to Oka-san is the artist, Mr. Ghufron Yazid. And alongside his artistic activities, Ghufron-san is also the facilitator of the young Muslim organization Olive, one of the organizations that offer a network for young Muslims living in Japan. Thank you for joining us. Next, I'd like to introduce Ms. Zuhaira Dzaatul Himmah, who is a student from Indonesia who is currently pursuing her master's degree at the Graduate School of Global Studies, Tokyo University of Foreign Studies. Thank you for joining us. And Ms. URANO Risa, who is a third-year student at Keio University, studying Environment and Information Studies. Her academic interests include Southeast Asian Studies and Islamic Studies. Thank you for joining us.
And regarding the detailed profiles of our participants, you can go to the Asian Center website, so please take a look at your leisure. And the TERAKOYA this time is co-organized by the Grants and Aid for Scientific Research C, Interreligious Dialogue and Church-State Relations in Contemporary Indonesia's research team. Now, today's flow. In the first half, Feby-san and Nonaka-san will have a dialogue, and in the second half, we will have Feby-san read out her own works. And then after that, we'll have comments and questions to Feby-san and have her answer. So I would like to hand over the microphone to Professor Nonaka. Professor Nonaka, please. Yes, once again, hello everyone. Thank you for your introduction. I'm from Keio University. My name is Yo Nonaka. I look forward to the time with you today. Now, personally, several years ago, I learned about Feby-san and Feby-san's works, and I was extremely touched. And today, one of our commentators is Professor Mari Oka, and I took part in her research team's publication project, and I had the opportunity to translate Feby's works into Japanese. That's why I'm serving as the MC today. And Kyoto University's Professor Yumi Kitamura runs a scientific research project on interreligious dialogue and church-state relations in Indonesia. And with today's project, there was a lot of overlap. So this project is co-organizing today's event. And at the beginning of part one, very briefly, regarding Feby's works, we'd like to talk about the situation in Indonesia today and Feby-san's works and the characteristics. I would like to give you my interpretation. And I'm sure everyone is keen to hear from Feby, but if you could please bear with me for a while. In Indonesia, there's a population of 270 million people, and a little under 90% are Muslim. So it's a Muslim nation. And the population is number 4 in the world, which means that Indonesia has the largest number of Muslim believers. And in Indonesia, Islam has traditional religions of Hindu, Buddhism, and in each local region there was the animism-like belief, and Islam has been mixed with this and accepted. So because of this, Islam in Indonesia is very tolerant of other beliefs. It's moderate, and it's also mixed with the local traditional beliefs. That is how Islam has taken root. However, since the end of the 20th century, the global Islamic rejuvenation has occurred and has impacted Indonesia. This is like the Suharto developmental dictatorship, where the students engaged in Islamic movements, and more women were wearing veils. And in Indonesia, in 1998, the country became a democracy. And since then, even though there has been going back and forth, democratization and economic development has moved forward. And in parallel, in society, more than before, Islam has started to have a bigger presence. And not just politically, but more like in daily life, Islam is becoming more apparent, and more people are worshipping or fasting more seriously, and schools where you can learn about the beliefs or teachings of Islam are becoming popular, and people are starting to use Arabian that comes from Islam, and people are starting to give their children Islamic names, and women's fashions are becoming more Islam, and pilgrimage to Mecca has become a boom. These kinds of things are happening at the same time and rapidly. And in recent years, we are seeing moves for conservatism, or many people are going after orthodox Islam. But in the other religions or in Islam, there's the minorities, and there are moves to try to eradicate them. So in the past, Islam in Indonesia has been moderate and tolerant, but it seems like there are big changes happening. In Feby-san's novels, regarding these changes in Indonesian society, regarding changes in the Islamic believers, that change is the background. So she has written a collection of short stories, Not Virgin Mary. And there are 19 works in the collection. And each of the works, personally, I empathized with all of them. So she has managed to grasp changes in society very aptly, but she has a sense of humor. It's not like she's trying to blame anyone or hurt anyone. In Indonesian society today, there are problems and concerns, and she helps us to notice what they are. That's how I feel. And two of the works, Porky wanted to be a Muslim, and Not Virgin Mary. I have translated these two into Japanese. So what kind of works are they? Later on, from Feby herself, we will ask her to read out aloud. So that's something to look forward to. And I'd like to briefly explain the two works. First, Porky wanted to be a Muslim. So the Islam academics, the ulamas, come together at a meeting. That is the stage. And Baby, or Porky, is the name of a female pig, and she says she wants to convert to Islam. So one ulama presents this to the group, and the story moves forward with the discussion among the ulamas. Now, in Islam, pigs are considered to be unclean. You are not allowed to eat pork. And of course, if a pig wanted to convert to Islam, that is 100% pure fiction. But they have social impact, power, authoritarians, and if someone or if a pig says they want to convert to Islam, it's the ulamas who have the right to make the decision of whether to accept or not. And I think her story includes some criticism of the ulamas in Indonesia today. Now, the other work, Not Virgin Mary. So a woman, Mary, has become pregnant without any sexual relations with a man. She is the heroine. So she's single, an office lady, and she's also a model for a male magazine. And sometimes she has a boyfriend. But this is actually a miraculous conception. She knows. And Maria, of course, in Christianity or in Islam too, is a respected woman. That's how she's depicted. She is Mother Mary, who gave birth to Jesus Christ. And in this work too, Maria, without sexual relations, has become pregnant. Her situation is the same. But Mother Mary, so far, has been respected and revered. But in modern-day Indonesia, no one believes what Maria, the heroine, is saying. Even her best friend says she should either get an abortion or get married to a boyfriend. And then they end up having a quarrel, and her parents end up crying. So for women who are not married becoming pregnant, or a woman who is a model for a male magazine, so it's quite tough in Indonesia for people like that. And I felt there was a lot of criticism or a lot of worry.
So that was a long preamble. But let me introduce Feby-san, who has written all of these stories. And I would like to take the format of a question and answer in order to communicate the attractiveness of Feby-san's works and also Feby-san's ideas. Thank you very much for waiting, Feby-san. Look forward to our talk. So Feby-san's works are very humorous and very unique, but are also critical of the Muslim society in Indonesia right now. And also, there's a relative comparison between the different ideas of Islam today. So I'd like to ask you, where did you get these very intriguing ideas? Where did you get these ideas from? And also, what inspired you to write this kind of content? And why did you use fiction or a short story format in trying to write about this theme?
Thank you very much, Japan Foundation, NONAKA Sensei, and all the panelists here. I feel so honored to be invited to be such a respectable event from Japan Foundation. And thank you so much, NONAKA Sensei, for the wonderful introduction about my work. So I grew up in Islamic family and values, and I grew up with Sufism stories. And for you might know that Sufism stories are usually funny, but they're also full of philosophical ideas and values about humanity, about God, about Islam as well, but Islam in a universal way, Islam in universal point of view. So I grew up with those kind of stories, and I can say that I learn about people. I learn about so many, worldview or the imagination of God through those kind of stories. And of course, I also learned it from my parents, from the Islamic clerics, or from the school. So whenever I observe the differences or the contradiction between what I have been learned from the stories or from the teachings, and I see the contradiction around me came from some Islamic leaders or some Islamic groups. I cannot help myself not to question about it, not to like scream loudly or quietly that that's not the teachings that I know. So that's how I grow my questions, grow my curiosity, and debate around so many questions in life. I observe what things that happened, and I compare it, what I heard or what I know, and what actually happened in daily life. Like, for example, as Muslim, I was taught that the core of the Islamic religion is about justice, and or Islam is a bless or a mercy or for all creation. But when I observe the reality, for example, what happened to minority groups in Indonesia, or even among the Islamic community ourselves, like Ahmadiyah group, for example, what happened to the minority group in Indonesia? They are not so well protected by the rest of the majority, and also not well protected by the government. And I see so many contradictions like that, and that's how the idea of making this kind of stories coming, because of all the burning question that I live all my life, but also I want to present it like the Sufism stories with the humor and the simple, deceptively simple style, but got a depth. And also, but I want to make it in a contemporary setting. So I want to make those kind of stories alive and enjoyed by more people, by more Indonesian people at first. So that's how I come with the idea to create the magical Islamism stories. And I choose fiction because I think fiction is a special medium where we can actually insert the ideas to people's mind, even a radical ideas, but with gentle and subtle way. And when I first published the story, the Porky wanted to be a Muslim, it was in November 2016, after a huge demonstration on November 4th upon the case of Pak Basuki Cahayapurnama's blasphemy case. And I wanted to make like a social experiment to the readers, to Indonesian readers. So I launched the story, and it was read by thousands of readers. And I want to see how people reacted to the story. And I see that some people make comments like the writer should be, leftist, or probably communist, because in Indonesia, everything different or strange, most people or many people will call it will blame on the communist title. But some people make a comment like that. But many people were surprised and actually can enjoy the story without being threatened. So, and I also tried for another story and post it online. And from what I experienced up until now, when people, when people read story or fiction, they reacted differently. We live in the era when everything is, we are flooded with a lot of information, a lot of input, and we rarely have a time to, to make a pause, like to push the pit stop button and to just, think and reflect. So many people, for example, in Indonesia, they just reacted to the news only for the title. Like, for example, Feby Indirani launched a book, Bukan Perawan Maria. They can just, make a comment on the title without actually reading the article or the news. But when I published the stories online, they didn't know how to react at first. So they read it first. They let themselves have a pause. And those brief moments, especially today, are crucial, because when we pause ourselves, we let something in and we hold our judgment. And that's how I think that's the magical of fiction, when after only a short brief of 5 to 6 minutes reading some short stories, at the end of the reading, we have become a slightly different person and hopefully better person. And that's why I choose fiction as a medium.
Thank you, Feby-san. In 2016, that's when this work was published and announced. Around that time, in Indonesia, there was division, signs of a division. I think that's when it was coming to the surface. And as Feby said, I'd like to add to that, in 2016, in November to December, there was a very political thing that happened. So the incumbent Jakarta governor, so the capital is Jakarta, but the incumbent Jakarta state governor was a Christian, and he was also Chinese descent. And he's called Ahok-san, and this person was accused of using and misusing the Quran and of insulting it. And many Muslims towards this governor held demonstrations against him and took action. That's what happened back then. And as what Feby is talking about is around that time. And the Ahok side, there were people who tried to defend him, and they also marched in the streets. So during several months, these things happened one after another. And including me, people who saw this, I'm sure the people of Indonesia thought so too, but Indonesia seems to be facing towards a divide, and also under the name of religion. And people felt a big sense of crisis. That sense of crisis spread in society at that time, and at that timing, Feby's work was announced. So the social impact, I think, must have been very, very large. And I want to ask you again, so magical Islamism. So that's the title of this event too. And this is what I heard from Feby-san. And one more thing, an expression that I love is, relax, it's just religion. And this book, the book launching, was done, and the message was, relax, it's just religion. That was the message that was used, and I thought it was very, very interesting. And regarding this, Feby-san, I'd like to talk about that a little bit, please.
Thank you, Nonaka-sensei, for explaining the context, because yes, that was the situation surrounding the book launching. So the book was officially launched as in a form of printed book on July 2017. And when I was about to launch the book, the first, the major publication that I approached rejected the book because they was in a dilemma actually. At first, they wanted to publish it because Feby is a Muslim, so it's probably like a kind of self-critical thing, and probably it's safe enough, because it's their own, it's the insider voice of Muslims. But then the situation getting, even worse, as Nonaka Sensei explained, and some persecution happened offline and online. So the whole situation become, very tense at that time. And when the major publication refused, to publish the work, I was supported by some friends and a small organization to, let's just keep on launching this book because it's probably, the perfect time for, for people to read it. But I thought like I don't want to present the book only. Like I wanted to create an experience for people. So then we discussed about it with the very small independent publisher at the time, and that it was Pabrikultur, and it's actually a cultural event organizer. So we discussed about the idea, and we wanted to present it as an art activities or artivism. Like we wanted to, to present the stories with visual art and the discussion, etc. So, and that's how I came up with the like a tagline, as Nonaka Sensei mentioned, relax, it's just religion, because at that time it was very tense. The situation was very tense. So we want to say like, it's just religion, it's not God. And we don't, what the religion actually wanted us to do. Like religion should, should make us a better person and not a hateful or a person. And what happened to us right now, like some kind of questions, or the campaign to ask people to rethink about the meaning of religion itself, and to remind people that we don't worship religion. Actually, we worship God, and God is love, and God is, and God is peaceful, etc. So that's how I come with the tagline, relax, it's just a religion. And I was happy that some visual artists want to join the movement, and later on, when the movement grow organically, we have musicians join us, created songs like Voice of Bacoprot. If you ever heard about the hijabi, Indonesian hijabi rock stars from Indonesia, 3 very cool girls from Garut, West Java. They make one song related to, inspired by Bukan Perawan Maria and also other musicians based in Berlin. We have also dancer make choreography out of it, so it becomes an organically, grow, like artists from various backgrounds, from various mediums who share the same mission with us, join and make use the story to facilitate them, or to to trigger their creativity to make another form of art. And we have also short films out of the stories, etc. So it happened to be like I share, concern with so many people, so many creative people, so many artists, and who respond the tension, respond the issue in a creative way. And I think it's like an antithesis of the tension, or the face of religion, which was stiff and very kaku. There some people some people even believe that religion and art cannot go together. We have musicians and singers or comic artists in Indonesia who stopped making music, who stopped doing art, because they believe Islam don't allow them to create art. And I think in its way, we make an antithesis of that. We respond to the problem with art, because we are not Muslim scholars, and some people also used to say, like, if you're not Muslim scholar, then you don't have audacity to to talk anything about Islam or about religion, because you're not Muslim scholars. But we still can share our own experience, or our own opinion, or our own thought about our experience. And as an artist, we make a creative expression as we fight back with a creative way. And that's how I love the movement, because it's not my movement, it's just everybody who share the same concern. And we also have women artists from Lombok, West Nusa Tenggara, and also from Bandung, West Java, because Bandung and Mataram are on the list of most intolerant cities in Indonesia. So I was happy that we got supported a grant at that time in 2019 from Cipta Media Ekspresi for it's the grant for Indonesian women artists, and that's how these women artists can collaborate and create our artwork and show our struggle and movement and share our experience. Because usually as a woman, as an artist, we don't really have a voice. We don't really have a voice to say anything about religion or related to religion.
Thank you, Feby-san. So, Porky wanted to be a Muslim and not Virgin Mary. I translated them into Japanese this time, but other than that, there are so many other wonderful works, and it's a big pity I cannot introduce them all today. But in relation to what you just said, there's just one work I'd like to introduce. And Feby's works, I think as the message that's in all of them, like you just said, so coexistence with religion is of course one message. And in addition to this, in Indonesia, there's the attachment to the local culture. And there's also the line of sight of not ignoring the poor people. For example, in your short collection stories, there's a story called The Angel's Questions. And there's this work, and I really like this work too. And this story is about a woman who dies young. She's the heroine, and she wants to go to heaven in her afterlife. So, while she was alive, she studied Arabian language, she's studied Islam, and right after she dies, two angels will ask questions, important questions to the dead, and she believes in that, and she's tried to prepare and be ready. But the story starts the moment she dies, but unfortunately, while she was alive, she did not show interest in the local Indonesian culture, or in the people suffering from poverty, or in other religions. She was not showing any interest at all. And right after she dies, with a sense of humor, but very severely, two angels question her. And she's surprised and she's shocked. That's what this work is about. And this also, well, the lady's dead, so that's a little lonely, but I think it's full of humor. But in contemporary Indonesia, I think this is expressing one of the tendencies of Muslims today. Regrettably, I think that's what's happening. So regarding this situation, Feby-san, does this mean that you have a sense of awareness of a problem?
Yeah, I think many of Indonesian people now follow the trends to, put all the apparent or all the surface, appearance or identity or symbols. They want to be acknowledged as a good Muslim by only by putting the symbol. So it's all in the surface level. Like, using the language, it should be Arabic. Otherwise, it's like it's something that it's something not unusual for Indonesian Muslim students to hear from the teacher in their school who said that the most important language to learn is Arabic, because it's the language of afterlife, it's the language of the angels. So the most important language is just Arabic, and just learn it so you will be safe until eternity, for example. And also, I respect fully of women's choices to wear hijab, like Himmah, for example. My mother also wear it, and also one of my sisters wear hijab. But I believe that it should be, women's choice to do it, whether she wants to do it or not. But what happened was there's a, pressure, either it's from the authority or from, social pressure, that if you don't wear hijab, then, you will be go to hell, or not only you, but also your dad, your brother. So it was a terror for women, it's like multiple pressure. And sometimes, I heard a lot of stories about that, about the pressure of, wearing Islamic clothes, etc., etc. So it's all about surface level. It's all about surface level. It's all about rituals. It's all about being seen as a Muslim and not actually be a Muslim. So, but this is the growing trend, and it's we are worried about that because it's detrimental. It's detrimental to a lot of aspects of our life if we keep on just focus on the surface level like that, and also don't let other people to have their own interpretation of Islam. So I think Nonaka Sensei got a very good point on reading or interpret the work, and I started with a simple and humorous thing like the language in the story of Angel's question. So the angel, it's a bit of spoiler. The angel question it's actually a male, but many people interpret it as a female, and it's okay. So when the angels question the corpse with Sundanese language, and he or she was in a huge shock, and that's how I want to tickle people's belief about using only one language to be fully blessed by God, while probably they don't really realize or aware about what happened around them.
Thank you. That's right. The heroine studies Arabian, the language, very hard. But the angels question her in Sundanese, the local language. And she lives in the Sunda region, and they ask the questions in Sundanese. So who do you think is your God? That's what they ask. And she does not understand Sundanese. And really, you don't even understand the language of the region that you live in. And the angels question her, and I think it was the Dayak language, her mother and father's language, a separate dialect, and they ask her in that dialect, you don't even understand the dialect of your mother and father? So in that respect, it's very interesting, but it's also, it hits hard. So Feby has a lot of interesting things to tell us, but in the interests of time, so we would like to end part 1. And we'd like to make this the final question. And then let's leave the rest to part 2. And just one more thing I'd like to ask Feby-san.
So in the past 1.5 years, I have not been able to visit Indonesia because of the COVID pandemic. I have not been able to enter the country. When Feby-san, how do you see current day Indonesia, including the COVID pandemic situation? So what is Indonesia like right now? I'm really interested to know what is going on right now. Has the COVID pandemic brought any new change? And under this very chaotic pandemic situation, have the problems that you have presented in your novel, such as the intolerance towards other people or the putting a priority towards Islamic beliefs, is that continuing, or have you seen any new differences because of the current situation?
Yeah, well, it's been hard for Indonesia as well in other parts of the world as well. I noticed a very interesting phenomenon when some Muslim groups, for example, they choose not to believe in Corona. They choose not to believe that we should avoid the crowd, and for that, please don't join the congregation in a mosque, for example, because they would say like, why you are so afraid of the virus? You should be afraid of the God, for example. You should be afraid of Allah. And you know, our life and death are in his hand. Those kind of things. And those kind of belief actually, you know, it gets a big risk. Like now, during the pandemic, we already have lost more than 600 clerics, I guess, around all over Indonesia. I'm not saying that those who pass away or who died don't believe in COVID, but you know, there is a quiet sense of belief that we should not be afraid of this, you know, of this virus, because we should be asked for God's protection, those kind of things. So I think it's very sad because we lost so many, you know, good clerics in Indonesia, because we tend to, you know, we tend to don't believe. I wouldn't say don't believe, but we tend to, you know, choose the other way, like, you know, just do usual stuff, you know, so don't limit our activities, you know, those kind of things. And Indonesia at the same time is a very, you know, communal, has a very communal tradition. Like we love to gather together. I mean, we really love to make gatherings, sit together, eat together, those kind of traditions. So yeah, it's a very high risk to do in this kind of situation. But on the bright side, I observe some you know, high solidarity among people. Like we tend to, you know, put aside a conflict a little bit. We still have those kind of debate in political side or many things, but at the same time, I also see more and more, you know, a social initiative, more and more social movement to take care of each other, you know, to support each other in this difficult time. So that's what happened. Yeah, but it's still challenging. I think it's not only in Islamic community, but also in Christian, because we also lose many priests during this pandemic. So that's quite challenging between belief, the tension between belief and the, you know, science. Like, you know, it's very hard.
Feby-san, thank you very much for that. So with that, I'd like to end off part 1 of this session, but we will get to talk to the other panelists in part 2. Thank you.
Okay, let's start part 2. And from here, the Japanese participants will join us. Thank you for joining us. Now, in her collection of short stories, Not Virgin Mary, we will have her read out 2 works, Porky Wanted to be a Muslim and Not Virgin Mary. Feby-san will read this aloud for us in Indonesian. First, she will read out Porky Wanted to be a Muslim. Now, regarding Porky Wanted to be a Muslim, as I introduced in part 1, so baby is the name of the female pig, but baby, in Japanese, I've translated this to be baby wanted to be a Muslim, but in Indonesian, it's B-A-B-Y, like a human baby. That is the word that Feby-san uses, and there's a big significance to this. In Indonesian, a pig is called a babi. Now it's B-A-B-I, that's how you spell babi. So baby and babi, it's like a pun. So babi stands for a pig, and then slightly different, there is an English word that expresses a cute baby. So first I translated this as little piggy. So I just wanted to say that there's another piece of humor from Feby-san. And Feby-san will read out aloud for us in Indonesian. On the screen, the English and Japanese translations will be put up on the screen, so please read them as you listen. So, Feby-san, could you please read Porky Wanted to be a Muslim?
Thank you very much, Nonaka-sensei. So this is the new cover of Bukan Perawan Maria, because it's just republished by one of the major publishers in Indonesia on July this year. So I would like to read the part of Porky Wanted to be a Muslim, or in Indonesian, as Nonaka Sensei has explained about baby. Baby ingin masuk Islam. Sidang majelis seketika ramai riuh rendah karena suatu kabar yang dibawa oleh Kiai Fikri, yaitu seekor babi bernama Baby menyatakan keinginannya untuk menjadi Muslim. Dari berbagai penjuru ruangan, ucapan Astagfirullah menggema, sebelum kemudian berbagai tangan serentak terangkat meminta kesempatan berbicara. Sedangkan sebagian peserta sidang lainnya bahkan tidak merasa perlu meminta izin dan langsung saja mencrocos. Pimpinan sidang pun kewalahan dan akhirnya menghentikan sidang selama 30 menit. Sesudah itu majelis memutuskan menyidang Kiai Fikri yang menjadi sumber berita kontroversial tersebut. Bagaimanapun menghakimi Kiai Fikri bukanlah sesuatu yang mudah, karena ia dikenal sebagai kiai yang disegani. Tubuhnya tidak tinggi, kurus, dan cenderung tampak ringkih. Namun, tatapan matanya tajam dan jernih. Ia memiliki aura yang kuat yang membuat semua orang segan kepadanya. Umurnya sulit ditebak jika hanya melihat penampilannya. Ia tampak matang dengan janggutnya yang pendek dan rapi. Sekaligus kelihatan cukup muda secara keseluruhan karena sikapnya yang santai dan terkendali. Ia mengucapkan salam dengan suaranya yang dalam, dan seluruh ruangan mendadak senyap. Baby menunjukkan kesungguhannya untuk masuk Islam. Dan saya termasuk orang yang percaya, hidayah bisa mengubah dan menyentuh siapa saja. Jika kita meyakini Islam menjunjung nilai keadilan, saya rasa kita mesti memberikan Baby kesempatan. Maaf, Kiai, ujar seorang peserta majelis. Apakah itu berarti Baby akan mengubah perilaku-perilaku anehnya? Aneh itu kan menurut kita, karena ia berbeda. Baby akan tetap menjadi babi, sesuai sunatullahnya.
Thank you, Feby. And I never thought you would put on that nose. That was quite surprising. Thank you. And next, not Virgin Mary. We'll have you read out aloud from that, please. So please go ahead.
Bukan Perawan Maria. Maria hamil, tanpa disetubuhi lelaki manapun, tanpa status pernikahan. Saat menyadari itu, dia ketakutan bukan main. Ini abad ke-21. Keajaiban macam Siti Maryam atau Bunda Maria tidaklah mungkin dianggap masuk akal. Semuanya sudah berakhir ketika Nabi Isa lahir tanpa ayah berabad jarak yang lalu. Zaman sekarang, siapa hendak percaya bahwa Maria bisa hamil tanpa berhubungan dengan lelaki manapun? Apalagi Maria memang bukan perawan. Ia sendiri yakin betul bahwa ia hamil secara ajaib, tanpa sentuhan lelaki manapun. Namun, siapa yang akan percaya? Sehari-hari gaya hidupnya seperti selayaknya kehidupan warga urban, bekerja mencari uang dan menghibur diri dengan membelanjakannya. Ia tidak menghabiskan hari-harinya di balik tembok masjid dengan bersujud dan beribadah seperti perempuan-perempuan suci itu. Ia hanya perempuan normal yang menghidupi diri sebagai karyawan di sebuah kantor swasta. Pekerjaan sampingannya adalah foto model majalah pria dewasa, yang artinya ia terbiasa tampil luas dengan baju yang cenderung terbuka di depan. Namun ia menetapkan batasan-batasannya sendiri, pose mana yang ingin dan tidak ingin dia lakukan. Caranya bersantai adalah menyeruput kopi di kafe-kafe dengan teman-teman dan berekreasi pada akhir pekan keluar kota, bermain cinta dengan kekasihnya jika sedang punya kekasih. Namun kini ia sedang tidak punya kekasih ketika justru sesuatu bertumbuh dan hidup di dalam rahimnya. Dan ia belum menyadari itu sebelum usia kandungannya memasuki 3 bulan. Ia hanya tahu ia tidak kunjung berdarah. Dan pada 2 bulan awal, ia hanya berpikir mungkin kelelahan, stres, atau sebab lainnya. Ketika pada bulan ketiga, perutnya kian mengeras, barulah dia panik. Membeli berbagai macam merek alat uji kehamilan dan menemukan bahwa semuanya menunjukkan hasil serupa. Dia hamil.
Feby-san, thank you very much. So, both of your works, we had you recite from just the beginning. So these two stories, how do they develop? In the close future, this will be part of the literary collection that will be published very soon. So I do hope you will be able to read the rest of her stories. So from here, we will have the 4 participants. Based on their specialty and their interests, give us comments and questions as we move forward with the discussion. So first, Professor Oka, we'd like to introduce her.
And as Takeda-san said at the beginning, Oka-san is a specialist of Arabian literature. She's also a specialist in third world feminism. And she is very interested in the issue of the Palestinians. She is involved in activities to support the Palestinians and also deepen understanding of the Palestinians. And so this seminar actually came out of the fact that the contemporary literature collection that Oka-san's group is trying to publish includes 2 of your works, Feby-san. And so Oka-san is really well-versed in Middle Eastern literature as well. And so from that perspective, I'd like to ask Oka-san to present questions and comments to Feby-san. And Oka-san, please go ahead. Oh, NONAKA-san, thank you very much for your kind introduction. Feby-san, even though online, I'm very happy to meet you. And so, as kindly introduced right now, my special area is contemporary Arabian literature. And I've especially been researching the Palestinians issue. In 2008, which is more than 10 plus years ago, we established a study group on Middle Eastern literature. So inside of Japan, this group looks at Persian and Arabic and Islam literature from the Middle East. And so all of the academics that are involved in these literature studies have been coming together to do study sessions. And so the Arabian literature or the Middle Eastern literature, which is my specialty, and I myself have also have experience living in Morocco and Egypt. And based on my experiences, I'd like to give some comments on having read your stories. Now, Palestinian literature, Arabian literature, and Middle Eastern contemporary literature tend to be very serious. Many of them have a very serious tone. And around 10 years ago, in 2011, in Tunisia, the string of Arabian uprisings started. So why did this string of revolutions occur in the Middle East? It's because these regions all had the same problem of dictatorship, regardless of what regime it was. And so the slogan back then was, we need to win back bread, liberty, and human dignity. And that has basically not changed. And so in literature, in novels in the Middle East, they tend to deal with these social problems as well. So I am used to reading that kind of very serious literature. And when I read your work, Feby-san, it was so humorous, and it was light touch, and it was really enchanting. I could laugh reading it. That was so fresh. That was new to me. I'm sure that Japanese readers who are used to Middle Eastern literature and Islam literature will get the same impression that I did. But I think that in reading your work, even though you have a very humorous tone, it probably does not mean that Indonesia has less serious problems compared to Middle East. So on the surface, maybe because of light touch, some people may think that Indonesia has less problems compared to the Middle East, but I believe that is not the case. I myself do not know too much about Indonesia, but several years ago, there was a documentary film called Act of Killing by director Joshua Oppenheimer. When it was released, we got to know about the anti-communist purge done under the Suharto regime. And so you mentioned how when something is different from what other people are thinking, you say communist. But those people who were labeled as communists were all massacred and in mass killings. And so Oppenheimer, until he released this film, it was not known that the victims and the aggressors were actually living in the same community, and the people who did the mass killings were not being made to pay for their killings. And so they were not punished. And so this film is currently released in Japan. The next film I'm going to be talking about is currently released in Japan. In former Yugoslavia, in Srebrenica, the Serbs have done a genocide or massacre of Bosnians. And even after more than 25 years, the people in the community still suffer from the wounds. And it's the exact same situation that happened in Indonesia. The people who were the victims were living in the same community as the people who killed them. And so the history and situation of Indonesia is no less serious compared to the Middle East. It is just as serious as what is happening in the Middle East. But even so, you chose to portray the problems in a very humorous way, which I think was a tactic or a strategy. So there is, well, you could have employed a very serious tone and tried to go for realism if you wanted to, but you chose to go for humor, and you also chose to come up with very surreal settings like Maria, who gets pregnant without having a sexual relationship, or a pig wants to convert to Islam. So these are very surreal settings. They would not happen in real life. But so I would like to ask you, why did you decide to write in a humorous tone? And I think you mentioned that in part one. Why? And I was totally convinced with your answer.
And by the way, of course, in the Middle East too, depending on the country, Islam will differ. And even if it's the same country, how do you live as an Islam? It differs from person to person. However, Islam in the Middle East seems to be is normal for some people, and then they look at Islam in Indonesia, and it seems really, really different. For example, in the world of the Middle East, in the 19th century at the beginning, so Western modernism, by coming into contact with this, that's how the modern era started. It happened in Japan too, which means that modernization is equal to westernization. And in that process, Islam is like pre-modernization. And Islam customs are not Western. Therefore, they are not modern. They are not civilized. So they tend to get negated. Therefore, and this is also exactly 100 years ago, after World War I, the Turkish Republic came into being. And almost at the same time, next door, Iran. Under a monarchy, rapidly we saw modernization moving forward. And until then, women were wearing scarves, veils, hijab. And they cast them away. They no longer wore them. And that was what modernization was. That was the definition of modernization, not wearing your hijab. Which means, when I was studying in Egypt in the 80s, in the early 80s, in the city areas, most people were not wearing scarves, not wearing veils. At university, a really, really small number of people were wearing scarves. And why are you wearing that scarf? So people tended to ask them. That was the situation. However, in the 70s, gradually, we saw the Islamic comeback. And from the 80s onwards, wearing a scarf, we started to see women who wear scarves. And now, if you go to Cairo University, the female students who wear scarves are now the normal ones. And the ones who do not wear the scarves are asked, why are you not wearing a scarf? So when I was studying 40 years ago, so now we're seeing an exactly opposite situation. So without knowing this, suddenly going to the Middle East, these kinds of Japanese people will say, oh, because this is an Islamic country, people are wearing scarves. It's very traditional. They tend to think that way, but it's not traditional. So the traditions were once struck down because they are not modern, but now it's part of postmodernism. However, in the case of Indonesia, that's not the case. So Islam in Indonesia is modern. In other words, pre-modernism, of course, it was a Muslim society, but as Feby-san told us earlier on, so that's different from Middle East Islam. So it's a mixture with the local religion. So it's like a tolerant, accepting religion as an Islam. And in the 70s, we started to see jumbo jets, means of transportation, people able to go on pilgrimages to Mecca. Or they were able to go to oil-producing countries to work. And after that, in the age of the internet, Islam in the Middle East was considered to be the orthodox Islam, and that spread. And people wore scarves, or like she was saying, people studied the Arabic language. So that's how it changed. And people who do not know about this will go to Indonesia and say, Indonesia is a Muslim country. That's why they're all studying the Quran. That's why they're all studying the Arabic language. It's very traditional. That's what they tend to think. But, and there was an introduction in the newspaper that said this. So studying Islam, studying Quran, there are the dormitory schools that were introduced. And they called this traditional as a caption. However, this is probably not a traditional school. It's probably more a modern school. In the context of Indonesia, I think that's probably a modern school. But our mentality back here in Japan is Islam equals traditional. That's how the Japanese tend to interpret it. And recently, Rohana Kudus, So in the early 20th century in Indonesia, she was the first woman to publish newspapers. She was a journalist, and she was involved in women's education. And I had the opportunity to read a paper about her. And Rohana Kudus. So in the region Minangkabau, that's where she was born. And in Minangkabau, there's the local custom law. And there's the very strict Islamism. And they were in conflict with each other. And the Islamic forces back then. So together, they teamed up together with the Dutch government that was colonizing them. And they had a war with the local forces that were believing in the customary law. And I was very surprised because in the case of the Middle East, for example, in Egypt, there's the Muslim Brotherhood. So this is a Muslim political group. And back in the days when they were under colonial rule from Britain, to fight against colonialism, the Muslim Brotherhood was born. So the Islamic comeback, or Islamism and colonialism, so they're coming together as an alliance. So that in itself is quite amazing if you study the Middle East. And another thing that I was very surprised about was, so not Virgin Mary, the story. And in Japan, of course in Japan too, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, being a virgin. So that was very important back in those days. But today, that is no longer the case. That's what Japanese society is like today. So from our perspective, the work Not Virgin Mary, when we read it, as Professor Nonaka said at the beginning, she's a model for a male magazine, or she's not married and she's had a lot of boyfriends. And regarding this, people tend to criticize her, and that seems to be pressure. So that's what we feel when we read the story. The women's sexuality is being tied down by such old ways of thinking. However, in the Middle East, from the perspective of someone who studies the Middle East, Maria's actions are shocking. That's what you feel when you are a Middle East scholar, because in the world of the Middle East, there are still honor killings. So this is a crime, but they still happen. And before you get married, if you have sexual relations with a man, then you have dishonored your family, and the father and the uncles and the brothers will kill the woman as an honor killing. And this word, honor killing, this word itself is separating the killing of women with ordinary murders and justifying them. And this is just femicide. And feminism has been criticizing this. And honor killings, using that expression itself, should be banned. But either way, this is for the honor of the family, and women are killed. And the honor killings, socially, are accepted. And this still exists in the Middle East.
And so there's still that mentality remaining. And so in Middle Eastern literature, that also becomes a theme for many of the novels. I wanted to ask about sexual norms in Indonesia because it seems to be very tolerant compared to the Middle East. So has it always been the case? Have people been always open? And is the current rise in Islamism putting more pressure into prohibiting that kind of thing? So that was a question that I had. And also one last comment. I think literature works can go beyond different ethnic groups, different nationalities or culture or language to really help people resonate with the stories like an Allah providing humanity with the imagination and using that imagination, no matter what kind of person we are, or even things that are not human, even for Porky who wants to become a Muslim. Through those stories, we can really get in touch with these characters that appear in the story. And this is something that also happens in Middle Eastern novels and Palestine novels and films as well. So there are people who live in these very serious conditions. And so the works do portray the sadness and the pain of these people. So we as an audience can feel the pain and the sadness through the works. But at the same time, people in Japan really have not experienced the dictatorship or the oppression. And so people in Japan tend to think this is a problem that is happening far away from our own country. Now, when I read Not Virgin Mary, it was really intriguing as a story. It was fun reading it. And instead of thinking, oh, people in a distant country are having problems, no, it was really intriguing. And as a reader, you could fully enjoy and sympathize with the situation. And so Maria is talking with her friends on who you would make as a father, who is the potential boyfriend that might become the wedded father of the child. So this is almost like girls' talk that happens in Japan as well. So it was really the story of young girls nowadays, and I felt that your story had real universal appeal. And so the humor that you employed is doing what exactly you had said you aim to do. It's not just a story that applies only to Indonesia. It goes beyond that. And it presents the problem as a problem that is very close to any reader's daily life. And I'm sorry, I have been rambling for a long time. But I do have two questions. The first question is, as I briefly mentioned before, the sexual norms around women in Indonesia. I'd like to ask a question about that. And also about Islam in Indonesia. I think you have given us an overview of what it's like. But when we compare Islam in Indonesia to Islam in the Middle East, what do you think are the differences? And also, for you, Feby-san, what does Islam mean to you? And we hear of the Taliban getting control of Afghanistan. And several years ago, there was the Islamic State that was controlling parts of the Middle East. The Islam beliefs that these groups are saying is the right Islam tends to become the image of Islam in the eyes of Japanese. But to you, Feby-san, what is Islam? What are the values that Islam holds for you? Those are my questions. Thank you. Oka-san, thank you very much for that. And Feby-san, please could you answer the question? I believe the first question was the female sexual norms in Indonesian society. And the second question, I believe, was a comparison with Islam in the Middle East and Islam in Indonesia. And also, what does Islam mean to you, Feby-san? I believe those were the three questions. And Oka-san's story was really intriguing. I took a lot of notes, but now I'd like to turn to Feby-san to answer the questions.
Oka-sensei, thank you very much for your kind, welcoming words. And also, I'm also honored to be, included to the collection of stories. And I hope that the stories can reach more and more people. And also, you have, explained so many interesting things. Like I would like to notice everything. It's very interesting how you explain about the context of Middle East as well, because if we talk about Islam, we actually cannot really we cannot not talk about Middle East as well, as you mentioned. Yeah, and it's true that what happened in Indonesia, it's not less, terrifying and not less serious than what happens in other places like, Afghanistan or Middle East. Like 1965 massacre, for example, it hasn't resolved yet up until now, and we live in the blood of millions of people. And I should, I will use a little time here to highlight that, because it's really important for us as a nation to actually resolve that tragedy. Like we can learn, for example, from Germany, for example, when how it's hard for them as well to resolve it as a country, as a nation, but it should have been a big learning for us, but we haven't done our homework for decades. For decades, we haven't really actually discussed about it. Only happening just recently. More and more documentary or novels talk about the event. So in a community level, in a people level, students, more and more people discuss about it, but we still need to do it like officially as a nation. What we are going to narrate this tragedy, after what has been done by the new order. They have the narration, but we should improve the narration and give more and more spaces to the victim and victim families. So yes, it's just a very very serious problem in Indonesia, and only one of other problems. So many conflicts, many issues of human rights, we still have to find justice for these people. But I think that's also that's how most Indonesian approach to their problems or situation. We tend to, at least from what I observe, that we tend to prioritize on the surface level first. So we always want to look that everything is fine, that everything is harmony is very important for us. And I think that's one of the I don't know, because we live in more than 30 years under the regime, under the dictatorship. So and for 3 decades, we just used to put everything under the carpet. Like the harmony is very important in the surface level. So, and that happens in so many areas of our life, including the sexual stories. So if you ask about the female, especially female sexuality these days, I think one of the hardest things that it's hard for us to actually discuss it openly, because as I said, that we tend to put everything under the carpet, and we don't want to ruin the harmony. We don't want to make anyone upset, for example. So everything tend to be just we don't talk about it openly. But if we go under the surface, if we go deeper, then we will see that more and more youngsters now tend to act freely or see sexualism different than my generation and older. They tend to be more openly about it, but also they cannot talk openly to their parents or to the older generation. Interestingly, on the parallel side, there's also a tendency to be more Puritan in the religious side as well. So we are familiar now with some kind of movement, Indonesia tanpa pacaran, so Indonesia without dating. So it's kind of huge movement, I think. And it just happened parallel in a parallel way. So this movement is growing at the same time, more and more youngsters in Indonesia also more openly about their sexuality. Like, for example, the queer movement, LGBTQ movement, now it's getting more and more support from many organizations, or many people talk more openly about LGBTQ. So I think it just goes parallelly, and it's a very interesting development, I think, because both of the sides are actively campaigning their thoughts, and sometimes they just mock each other in the social media sphere. So it's a really open and it's really crowded. But I see it as a very interesting development as well, as long as both sides can have spaces to express their own opinion and thought. And the second question about Islam in Indonesia versus Islam in Middle East, as Oka Sensei has explained it very well about the differences. I think, well, it's only recently that we hear Saudi Arabian women can drive by herself, but that is something that Indonesian women has enjoyed for a very long time. And even in Aceh, for example, Aceh women was famous for their strength, like Cut Nyak Din, a female leader from Aceh. She's really famous for her leadership and her strength and her courage. But what happened under the conflict was, I think, but it's also happened not only in Aceh but also in many parts of the world. When conflict happened, when war happened, it's always women who suffers more. And that's why I always feel that, as Virginia Woolf said, as a woman, I have no country. As a woman, my country is a whole world, because women tend to have similar experience when we deal with a conflict. And when tsunami happened in 2006, then the conflict has ended in Aceh, but then the pressure on women become more and more tense because of the Sharia law, and it's been a disappointing development for me and many Muslim friends as well, Indonesian friends, because in Aceh now, many women get get very limited on their expression. And well, it's similar to what happened in with our female friends in Taliban, in Afghanistan, for example. So as you may, we know, as Oka Sensei has already explained, how different Muslim from one country to another, but also we have some, similarities or the same line as well, that whenever the authority or the dictatorship lead, then they can press, in the name of religion, they can just, oppress women. Like, for example, if Aceh or other province in Indonesia wants to implement Sharia law or Islamic law, the first policy that they will implement it should be about women's dress. But we can see from the data that Aceh, for example, is one of the most corrupt province in Indonesia. So it's always, they just focus on regulating women to behave, but not really solve the real problem of the province, of the real problem of poverty, etc. So that happened in many places. That happened. I think that also happened in Afghanistan. That also happened in some Middle East countries. That's the similarities, and it's a big challenge for Muslim as a community as well, because some of us actually believe some leaders who use the religion to oppress them. So the people who's being oppressed believe the oppression because they use God, they use Quran verses, etc. So for me as a Muslim, observing all the things in the world, the differences, the challenges, it leaves, for me, Islam it's more like a value, like an ethic that leads me as a human, and also I see Islam as it's like my parents, it's like my mother. It is something that it cannot separate it from me. I cannot separate it me from Islam. I cannot separate it myself from my parents, because it made me who I am. It contributed to how I become. But then, as an adult right now, I have a healthy distance to my parents as well. Like, I don't depend on them as much as when I was a little kid, for sure. And I can also criticize them, even though I don't always tell them directly, but I know that I can have my own thoughts. I can so I can criticize it, I can adjust it with my own needs or my own my own context. So that's how I see Islam right now. I see Islam is it's more like a core value, because as I mentioned, that I believe Islam is about justice. So that's how I try to run my life. I always ask whether what I do is it's already just to anyone, or do I do something at the cost of other people, for example. So yeah, that's it.
Feby-san, thank you very much for answering the question. So that was a very interesting discussion. And we have 3 more panelists who are joining us today. So I hope we can evolve the discussion further. And Takeda-san has already introduced the other panelists, but I would like to briefly introduce them once again. The first panelist that I would like to introduce once again is Ms. Zuhaira Dzaatul Himmah, who is studying at the Graduate School of Global Studies, Tokyo University of Foreign Studies. And so she graduated from the University of Indonesia in Japan Studies, and she has the same interest that I do. She's very interested in popular culture, both in Japan and Indonesia. So Himmah-san, could you give us your comments listening to the conversation so far? And also, if you have one or two questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you. I would like to switch to English for my question.
Thank you very much for the chance. First, I want to thank you, Miss Feby, because I also felt the same about Indonesian condition and Muslim society, and actually I feel very sad, but I don't have enough courage to being frontal about it to people who are very hard to accept another perspective. But I think you have done a big step for gaining their understanding about other perspective too. And I have read your novels, the Bukan Perawan Maria, and I really like it. And the one that I really like is the Angel's Question. I just thought that, oh, I also thought from when I was little that you will be asked who is your God, and maybe it will be in Arabic, but but I think after read your book, well, it is possible. And of course, because it is God, he had power, so it's very understandable, if his angels also understand every languages in the world. And I, after reading your novels, I rethought about a lot of things, and that there is really nothing we really know about the God or their judgment, because we cannot see him, and we don't know what will happen after we die also. And my question is, actually I also grown in a not very strict, but my family also have a strong Islamic belief. And well, actually because of after the Ahok movement, my mother also she is going through a lot of in Facebook, and there are so much fake news, and I think she becomes harder in a way, and she starts saying things Chinese is not good and everything. And sometimes I would say you could not say something like that, you don't know the person, but it's actually really hard to reach out. So mostly I just silence, and when I have more power, I will say softly. But my question is if it is you, how you would approach people who basically they have their own perspective, and they are really just seeing that, and it's really hard to insert another point of view. So how are you dealing with that kind of people? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Himmah, and thank you for reading the book. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure if you like it. For me, I always, I don't really have an intention to change people who get different opinion from me. Actually, it's more like I will, I believe that at the very bottom of everything, we actually want the same thing. We are human beings. We want to feel love. We want justice. We want everything good. So I always try to focus on our sameness rather than our differences. Our sameness, our similarities. Like, so every time, I face people with different opinion or different thoughts, I try to create like our common ground together. Like, okay, mom, you probably don't like, you probably ever met one Chinese which has, bad attitude or anything, but you surely ever met a Japanese or a Padanese or any ethnicities that also got, bad attitude, for example, or anything. So I always try to focus on what can we do together, what is our similarities, what's the same. And that's how I operate actually. That's how I operate in most areas of my life. That's how I operated with the story as well. That's how I operate with the movement. I always focus on what our new conversation together, what is our common ground together. Because even though I might be, look very different compared to, Habib Rizik, for example, or any, strict religious leaders, but at the very bottom, we want the same thing. They want the same thing as I do. My mom and you want the same thing. We want the same thing. So that's how, I don't try to change anyone because I think nobody can. What I do is more like, try to, given other colors or other perspectives or other stories, but people only can change themselves if they want to. So by that awareness, I don't, I just let people be. If they're trying to like forcing myself to me or, just imposing their opinions, I will gently set my boundaries. Like, okay, you probably don't like this part about my story, but wouldn't you agree about, being more compassionate to other people, for example? So always find the sameness or the similarities. That's one thing. And also, if they keep on, pushing themselves on me, for example, I would choose to just, leave them peacefully. Like, because I think, if we cannot have the common ground or if we cannot create a new conversation together, then I will just leave, because I need to protect my energy as well. And I don't want to, I choose my battle wisely. That's the thing. And I think, we all should choose our battle wisely as well.
Okay, Himmah-san, Feby-san, thank you very much. And our second participant, I would like to introduce her. Oh, him is Mr. Ghufron Yazid. So he is an Indonesian nationality. He's Muslim, but he was born and brought up in Japan. And He studied design at Keio University Graduate School. He graduated several years ago, and right now in Tokyo, in Yoyogi Uehara. He's a staff at the Tokyo Jami, the biggest mosque in Japan, and he is linking young Muslims living in Japan, and he is the head of the group, Olive. And from him, he's the only male participant today. That's just by chance, but I wanted to have the perspective of a male Muslim about what he thought about Feby's works. So that's why I've asked him to join us. So, Ghufron, would you like to go ahead? Yes, hello, this is Ghufron speaking. So very briefly, I'd like to introduce myself. So, as Nonaka-san mentioned, I was born and brought up in Japan, and I'm now a design artist, and my activities are centered around the mosque, and I'm also engaged in young Muslims, and I have Indonesian parents, and I was born and brought up as a Muslim. And regarding Indonesia's social problems, we talk about this in our family a lot. So Feby's works, I feel that they are very close to home as I read them. And the more I grow up, personally, I have become more aware of my religion. Until then, religion was not really part of my life. But as I became an adult, I have been looking for my religion, looking for my God. And that's up until today. So what is religion? I think about that a lot. So what I've learned from my parents, the Islam that I learned, or the Islam that I know, that's not necessarily the only form of Islam. So I've been reading lots of things, meeting people, and read the Quran, and there are lots of things that I learn. And I am a Muslim that was born in Japan, a second generation. So as a young person, realistically, as a Muslim, how should I live my life? And Feby's works. So they're about daily life. And there's a lot of overlap with what I feel in my heart. So reading Feby's works, it felt very comfortable. And I thought, there's someone like this who can talk about what I think, who lives in Indonesia. And as works about Islam, Feby's works are full of humor, and that was very unusual. So I hope she writes a lot more. And personally, I'm involved in design and art. So as an artist, there are lots of things I can do. So this world itself was created by God. So Islamic or Islam, that's not really something we need to worry about. So regarding everything, everything was created by God. So we should not be tied down by the concept of is it Islamic or not. So the Quran as a ways of expression, or as things that are created by people who are Muslim. That's how I want to be connected to the world. And I look forward to your future activities, Feby-san. And I have two questions. And maybe there's some overlap with a former question. But personally, regarding the people who appear in Feby's works, there are people who are facing headwinds, but I can feel that they do not lose their belief, be it Maria, be it Baby. The Islamic teachings are teachings of mercy, but there is sometimes a conflict with the community. And in the beliefs, there are a lot of obstacles. However, Muslims all over the world, or people all over the world, not just Muslims, there are people who live with religion in their hearts. So everyone is suffering from obstacles, and yet they still have religion in their hearts. And not Virgin Mary. So Mary is facing a headwind, no one believes her, and yet she keeps her faith. For Maria, like her daughter. So for you, Feby, so what is it that keeps you true to your religion? That is my first question. So what is it that keeps you connected true to your religion? And my second question is, I read your two works, and as a Muslim, regarding the ideal religion, it made me think about that once again. But at the same time, so talking about ideal, how should it be? So when you think about things that way, you are actually trying to put things into a framework, and you should not be doing that. So the teachings of Islam should not be just one path. So people and Islam, so Islam is going to be different depending on the person, and they're all okay. They're all different colors, so it doesn't have to be black or white. So each person has their own color, and that makes Islam beautiful. And yet, people are trying to force their own colors on each other. So, regarding your own color, so I believe that you should not force your Islamic color onto others, but Feby-san, as a writer, you use your novels and you use your own words, and I believe you want to leave your own Islamic color in the world. So could you please talk about that a little bit?
I guess you talk about personal religion or personal belief versus organized religion, and I think most of the problem in the world related to religion, it's related to organized religion, because like religious groups or political religious leaders or political leaders tend to use their power in the name of religion, but actually it's only for them to gain more power and to control people. So I so much agree with what you said about Islam. It's really it used to be, I mean, it should be very personal, and if like a million Muslims, so it should be million colors, as you said. But it's when Islam or any belief become our own thing, our own personal belief. But at the same time, we know that so many interests, so many people or figures or parties want to gain the power, and using religion, not only Islam, we see conflict of religion, of different religion also, but using religion is always one of the easiest part to trigger people, because it hits people at the very core of people. It triggers the belief, their identity. So it's so easy to use, to manipulate people using using religion, and also using the things that we actually never really know, like hell and heaven, the things that happen in afterlife. So or sin and reward. So I think if the thing that actually we not here yet, like we're still here on earth, but we are so busy thinking about heaven and hell. We're so busy thinking about afterlife because we don't know that. And people, and yeah, as a human being, we tend to afraid to something that we don't know. But that fear was manipulated by by some religious or political leaders or both. So that's how it's so easy to manipulate people's fear, in the name of religion. So, but for me, I'm an individual. Well, yeah, I can be many things. I'm a writer. I'm an artist. I'm a Muslim. I'm a daughter. I'm whatever. But I'm me, and as an individual, I think it's a part of human nature to want to leave a signature in in every way she can or he can, whether people want to notice or not. So in my personal, I mean, in on individual level, I think it's only natural to do it. Like I don't really intend to show like this is my color of Islam, that kind of thing. It's only like natural because I just want to create and I just want to, leave mark, but not particularly on Islam color. But I think that's very interesting question. But and if you want to explore about that, I just think it's probably I want to leave the mark of the color of Islam that is fun and friendly, and open and inclusive, and and universal. Those kind of color, like and distinct, but also welcome, and and just the color itself. You don't have to define color all the time, right? It's just the color, and that's it.
So, Ghufron-san, Feby-san, thank you very much for that. Let us go to our third panelist, who is Ms. URANO Risa, and she is a third-year student at KU University. She's one of my students, actually, and she has been learning about Indonesia ever since she joined the university, and she has been studying at Malaya in Indonesia, and she's joining us from the perspective of joining us from a Japanese person who's learning Indonesian. Hello, I'm Urano. And because your stories were short, I could read them very quickly. But even after reading them, I had so many thoughts that went through my head. And so it really made me think. And up until the time I joined university, I knew nothing about Islam. I knew nothing about Indonesia. After joining the university, I got a chance to come into interaction with Islam and also learned Indonesian. And in the beginning, I would have thought that Islam is a very rigid religion and it might be very scary. But then after I got to know about it, I thought that it's actually a very flexible and very tolerant kind of religion. And for people in Indonesia, maybe this may not make sense, but from the perspective of a Japanese person who really does not live a religious life at all, religion seems like something that's serious. And many people think that one religion probably cannot get along with another religion. There will be conflicts between religion. But when I went to Indonesia, I found that people were quite tolerant towards each other and different religions could coexist with each other. That was my initial impression. But looking at current day society, I felt that maybe a little under the surface, some things maybe not be working as well. So what I saw was just on the surface. So maybe coexisting religions may not be that easy. So that is my most recent thought. And so when I was thinking about that, I got invited to take part in this seminar. I read your work, and I was amazed and really happy to see the problems presenting in such a light, fun manner. And so this has been a really great time for me. And so I have two short questions. So I'm a Japanese person, and as a student, I have this question. So when I tell my friends that I am studying Islam, then almost 100% they will say, oh, I know, people who are of Islam faith do not eat pigs. So somehow many people seem to connect being on Islam with pigs and forbidding them. And so Japanese people who do not know much about Islam only know that pigs are forbidden in the Muslim faith. And that seems to go hand in hand. So I have a very basic question about pigs. What kind of existence are pigs to Muslims in general? The very basics. If you can tell me, that would be very helpful. And in your work of fiction, if pig could really become a Muslim, which is the same status as people being Muslim. So how would that change the existence of pigs in people's minds now that the pig is a Muslim, just like we are, or people are? And the second question I would like to ask is this. My Japanese friends really do not live close to religion. Many of them do not lead a religious life. So right now, in the Olympic and Paralympic villages, we hear of halal foods being very scarce, and that's a problem for athletes who are Muslim. So we hear that news. So many Japanese people do not know what kind of values Muslims have. They do not know what kind of thoughts do Muslims have. So Japanese people in general really do not have much understanding of the Muslim faith. So Feby-san, when you had written this work, maybe you may not have thought about this, but if your readers were to be like many Japanese, people who do not understand or who do not know much about Islam, who were not so interested in Islam before, and if they got to read your work through Nonaka Sensei's translation, so even if they do not much about Islam or religion, what are the messages that you would like them to get from your stories, or what would you like to them to take away, or what would you like to them to read from your story?
Thank you very much, Urano-san. Well, what kind of existence pig is to most Muslims? Well, from what I know, many people consider it as a, dirty animal par excellence. Like my mom, for example, she really cautious about not to let any food stuff, contain pork or anything even close to that, like being cooked on the same fry, for example. I mean, not even the food stuff, but close to that element. She's really cautious about it because she believes that if those elements in the food stuff ever enter her body, all of her prayers will be rejected or refused by God. That's those kind of beliefs. So for many people, for many Muslim people, they really pig is just just totally forbidden, and that's the end of discussion. And yeah, so that's a little bit of the story. So that's why I choose the pig as an allegory of something that is allegory to represent minority at the story, because it's really difficult for most for the majority of Muslims to see pig as a natural creation, like it's just like other animals in the world. It's just like and if they believe, for example, if they really believe that Islam is a bless or a mercy to all creation, so it actually includes the pig. But it's really hard to see it because we tend to we grow to believe that that is a very very harmful and dirty and just so no animal. So that's why it's just like, well, it's a common joke for among Muslims, like one Muslim can do all the sins in the list, but still don't want to eat pork. That's the thing. So if it ever happened like you mentioned, the if the conditional, if ever happened that pig is actually can convert it, well, I think it's going to be massive change. And I don't know, it's a part of like Mission Impossible kind of thing. But that's the beauty of fiction. We can imagine anything, right? So I think if it ever happens in the world, it's going to be massive. It's going to be a huge, shocking situation. But also at the same time, it can be like a new standard, like a new standard of ethics, or a new standard of, you know, for example, how can you embrace your Ahmadiyya brothers? We have we even have accepted pig to be our part, to be our family, for example. So you should be more compassionate to you filling the blank. All the people that usually, all the group that usually being discriminated, you can fill in the blank, because the view towards pig is like the very bottom of everything, like, you know. So if we can accept this thing, we can actually be embrace everything that we used to discriminate in previous times. So that's how I imagine, but it's, you know, it's utopian as we understand it. So on the second question, I believe that fiction in general have universal elements, as Oka Sensei has mentioned. So I hope that Japanese readers still can get the story as universal. Still can relate to the story even though they don't know anything about Islam or Indonesia before. And I hope that, you know, they can relate to the story while they find out variety of Indonesian society, especially in urban settings, or experience variety in Muslim perspectives as well. So yeah, I think well, even though, for example, my readers in Italy, even though they don't know Indonesian context or Islam before, but they still can relate to these stories as, you know, as human beings, because after all, emotion is universal. Thank you.
Urano-san, Feby-san, thank you very much. So your conversations are very, very interesting. I want to hear more. But I regret to say we have already exceeded the allocated time. So we would like to end part 2. And personally, part 1 and part 2, I have briefly summarized them into 5 points. Very briefly. Number 1, Feby's works. So in Indonesia, regarding Muslim society, Feby herself, she may feel anger, she may feel question certain things, and I can tell that that's in her works. And Feby-san personally, in her works, regarding Indonesian readers, she said there was a variety of response, and she talked about this. And Urano-san's question, the second question, for non-Muslims or people who do not know the Indonesian context, how can they read the story? How do you want them to read the story? And regarding this, as Professor Oka was saying, Feby-san has been talking about universal messages in her works. And I think we were able to confirm that. So I hope that in Japanese, you will be able to read and enjoy her works. And the third point is, Professor Oka pointed this out, and I agree with her completely. In Indonesia, compared to the other Arabian or other Islamic areas, some people may simplistically think that in Indonesia, maybe the situation is not that serious, but that is not correct. And Feby also touched on this. And Professor Oka pointed out, and she is correct, regarding this problem. So this can be written as a serious realism story, but Feby has been using her humor. And I think she's been successful. And yes, I agree with Professor Oka. And on the other hand, compared to the Arabian countries, Islam in Indonesia has certain characteristics. And in part 2, I think that was revealed to us. And Professor Oka's comments covered modernity and Islam, the relationship, and women and women's sexual norms. And Islam in Indonesia, among Islam across the world, Indonesia does have special characteristics, and we were able to confirm that. And number 4, Himmah-san and Ghufron-san pointed out, so the understanding of Islam and beliefs. So 10 different people will have 10 different beliefs and 10 different colors. And for the non-Muslims, or for the Japanese, that is a big misunderstanding. The Japanese and non-Muslims believe that Islam is like one solid bedrock. There's only one type. But depending on the times, the location, depending on the person, the beliefs are diverse. And through the teachings of Islam, this diversity is ensured. However, as part of this, a certain human being or a certain group, regarding how other people practice their beliefs, or regarding how they think about their God, they are judgmental. And this is depicted in Feby's works. And I think that's related to the questions by Himmah-san and Ghufron-san. So the ulamas who discussed baby, or people who said that you could never have a Virgin Mary. Mary could not be pregnant. So these examples of people being judgmental, I think, were apparent in her story. So regarding this, not just in Indonesia, but all over the world, these are examples that can be seen. For example, there's a current ongoing issue in Afghanistan. There's the power transition, and the local people are worried. And what we just discussed, I believe, is not unrelated. And lastly, the fifth. So the power of novels, we were able to reconfirm this power. So there are sensitive, and sometimes there are themes or messages that may lead to conflict. But being able to talk about this with humor is the power of novels. And Professor Oka was saying, this is creativity that Allah has given to human beings. So, being able to empathize with other people, and by using a sense of humor to Japan's readers, she's able to have a kind of universality. And many people touched on this in the second half. And the way Feby does it is, so in her novels are short stories, so it's very easy to read them. So there's the popish kind of style, and without inviting conflict. In Indonesia, the mainstream discourse and people's awareness, I think, has been expressed. And we were able to once again confirm this. And lastly, Feby-san, already last year in October, has released a collection going after Muhammad. So this is a sequel to Not Virgin Mary. I'm not quite sure about the actual title, but she published this last year in Indonesia. So I hope that we'll be able to introduce her sequel in Japan as well at a different opportunity. So Feby-san, you have your book out, Feby-san. So Feby-san, thank you very much for joining us today. And Professor Oka, Himmah-san, Ghufron-san, URANO-san, thank you very much for the active discussion. Thank you very much indeed. And with COVID-19 being prolonged, it's not just Indonesia, but in Japan, in Kanto, around Tokyo, it's very difficult to actually meet each other face to face. But I do hope that in the near future, we will be able to meet in person. So with this, I would like to give back the microphone to Mr. Takeda. Thank you very much. Thank you. So there were a variety of discussions, a variety of issues have become apparent, and the discussion could go on and on, but today we'd like to put it on hold for the time being. The online seminar series Asia Center TERAKOYA, we plan to have a variety of themes. So regarding the detailed schedule, please go to the Asia Center website and please look at our SNS. So once again, Feby-san and all the other participants, thank you very much for taking part and thank you for staying with us for so long. So with this, we would like to end the online seminar series Asia Center TERAKOYA. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.